Indians are being picked on by Western governments to hide their political mismanagement and incompetence. This is a trend for quite some time, but has accelerated more recently with the intellectually retarded decision by the Trump administration to blame India for the war in Ukraine. Statistically, India's trade with Russia is not the largest. The Americans, Europeans, and the Chinese are doing more trade with Russia in oil and other related products. The numbers don't add up, and these are official numbers. Frankly, I doubt these guys would pass a high school statistics exams, because they are trying to convince the American public and the world despite the numbers showing the contrary.
India has blinked.
We are not the biggest purchasers of Russian oil, that is China. We are not the biggest purchasers of Russian LNG. I'm not sure, but I think that is the European Union. We are not the country which has the biggest trade surge with Russia after 2022. I think there are some countries to the south. We are a country where actually the Americans said for the last few years that we should do everything to stabilize the world energy markets, including buying oil from Russia. Incidentally, we also buy oil from America, and that amount has been increasing. So, quite honestly, we are very perplexed at the logic of the argument that you had referred.
As mentioned by Foreign Minister Jaishankar, India has increased its purchase of Russian crude oil. But that was at the request of the Biden administration after putting a price cap of $60 on the Russian oil to minimize and prevent profits going into the Ukraine war. To stabilize the global oil prices that could jeopardize the global market, India was requested to refine the oil instead of the Russians to avoid the sanctions. Now India is being punished for it.
That is what happened to the oil market in 2022. Prices reached $137 per barrel. What did the West do? They did not sanction or ban Russian oil. Instead, they asked others to buy it. In this case, India. Before the war, we barely bought any Russian crude. It made up just 0.2% of our imports. But today, it stands at 36%. This was a good deal for India and the world. We got oil at discounts. The world got stable oil prices. In fact, the US actively encouraged India to do this. Listen to what Joe Biden's Treasury Secretary had said, and I'm quoting, "The United States is happy for India to continue buying as much Russian oil as it wants, including at prices above a G7 imposed price cap mechanism, if it steers clear of Western insurance, finance, and maritime services bound by the cap." That was the US Treasury Secretary in 2022. Now listen to the Assistant Secretary of State, sort of like America's Deputy Foreign Minister. This is what he said in 2024. I'm quoting again. "India has played a key role in efforts to stabilize global energy markets through its purchases of Russian crude." And finally, you have the former ambassador, Eric Garcetti. He openly admitted that the US encouraged India to buy Russian oil.
They bought Russian oil because we wanted somebody to buy Russian oil at a price cap. That was not a violation or anything. It was actually the design of the policy, because as a commodity, we didn't want oil prices going up, and they fulfilled.
So why is President Donald Trump fumed up with India? Like in many diplomatic situations, there are multiple reasons. Donald Trump displays all the characteristics of a serial narcissist. He is the textbook version of it: self-importance, impulsive, lack of empathy, arrogance, selfish, controlling, and all those listed here. This Pakistani general is the de facto leader of the most prolific sponsor of terrorism. Pakistan had launched an attack in Kashmir on 22nd April 2025, killing 26 civilians who were mostly non-Muslims. The 26 men were shot point blank in front of their wife and kids. India responded with military operation known as Operation Sindoor, striking multiple targets in Pakistan, supported by satellite images. The first reaction from the White House is that it is none of our business, as stated by the narcissist prodigy, J.D. Vance. Multiple military terrorist targets were hit, including nuclear sites. There was a sudden change of reaction from the White House when Pakistan panicked. It is also suspected by Indian media that American assets and military personnel or contractors were on site, resulting in the panic reaction from the White House. From White House ambivalence to immediate panic calls to both parties. India stopped because it had achieved its initial military objectives, and a concern that sensitive American assets, nuclear or otherwise, were placed in Pakistan and could be hit by the Indian attack. Now Donald Trump wants to take credit for the cessation of hostilities despite the American historical and continuing military support for Pakistan. India refused to acknowledge it, and that got on the wrong side of Trump.
You do admit, sir, that Pakistan has had a long history of backing and supporting and training and funding these terrorist organizations.
Well, we have been doing this dirty work for the United States for about 3 decades, and West, including Britain.
India has always maintained an independent foreign policy dictated by its own interest rather than any of the superpowers. America, whilst describing India as a strategic partner in Asia, as counterbalance to China, wants India to be an obedient ally that will do what it is told to do. That is an irreconcilable mismatch that annoys the Americans. American elections are funded by donation from various interest groups, including the deep state. They include the oil industry, agriculture, pharmaceuticals, and others. With those fundings come expectation of new markets opened to American businesses. One of the likely pain points between India and America is to replace Russian crude oil with American shale oil, which is far more expensive for the Indian consumer. Agriculture and dairy products are the other pain point. So far, all the trade deals that America under Trump had concluded are extremely one-sided. Surprisingly, Japan, EU, and South Korea had cowed down to Trump's demand. Imagine you are told to invest $550 billion over a long period and allowed to take only 10% of the profit. Is that the art of the deal, more like art of coercion? There were multiple trade deals that were announced by Trump, but none had been ratified by Parliament. Maybe 1 or 2 of those deals will be ratified from the likes of Pakistan. So far, only China, Russia, and India have stood their ground. India has been singled out because Trump believes it has the least leverage against America. It can be bullied without consequence. As the Chinese diplomat had stated, give America an inch and they will take a mile. It is important to understand that India, after independence from the British, now has surplus of food which it exports on preferential arrangement to many countries, particularly the poorer countries. However, it was never the case. Under the British there were multiple famines, many which were never recorded. The ones that the British had difficulty suppressing are the Madras famine and the Bengal famine. Indians clearly remember the British had diverted food from India to Europe, allowing people to starve and die in India. Why is this relevant? American agriculture in itself is protected, but Trump wants India to open its protected agriculture industry, which employs about 45% of the workforce. India is a huge market for agriculture. Most of the agriculture in India are small family farm holdings which cannot compete with large industrial-scale agriculture in America. The food quality from small farm holdings are healthier than industrial-based production. On top of that, America wants India to allow seedless genetically modified crops, making India dependent on America for seed plantation every year. That is not going to happen. India is not going back to the days of famine under the British. America under Trump wants to decimate Indian agriculture, just as the Chinese did to American manufacture. That is a red line. The same controversy is with dairy products. India is the world's biggest producer of milk, mostly for internal use. The milk comes from grass-fed or organic cows, which is a must for the majority Hindu population in India. However, American cows are fed with animal products, and milk is not appropriate for the Indian market. This is another point of contention. Donald Trump is so focused on the profitability of American corporates to the extent of disrespecting local Indian tradition and the health and well-being of the people. The Indian government will not allow certain genetically modified products and non-organic milk into the Indian market to protect local farmers, respect the culture and religious sentiments. That is another red line. Unlike his previous term, Donald Trump business interests have massively expanded in his second term. I had mentioned earlier about election or political contributions, which in my opinion is a form of legalized corruption, favoring corporates at the expense of people everywhere, America or India. On top of that, Trump family has signed a crypto business deal with Pakistan, the biggest sponsor of terrorism, just before the terrorist attack in India, killing 25 Hindus in Kashmir. That explains why America has taken the Pakistani narrative against India. There were some media suggestions of the same crypto deal with the Syrian government headed by an ex-terrorist. We also know about the well-publicized $400 million luxury airline gift from the Qatar government. On top of that, there is also a news article regarding Trump's demand for payment as part of the trade and tariff negotiation with Switzerland. The American media does not cover that, but it seems to be talked about in Europe. To me, it seems obvious that to get a favorable trade deal or tariff treatment from the American president, you either offer financial incentives to his family or play onto his ego. Better still recommend a Nobel Peace Prize or his ability to end conflicts, regardless of whether it is true. India did neither of that and is being singled out for harsh tariff penalty. Also, given Trump family's financial interest in China and going by his readiness to accept gifts as dubious as they seem, China may have offered financial incentive to penalize India, which has dual purpose: to prevent India from being the manufacturing alternative to China in terms of export, and to push India closer to the BRICS alliance with China. India is being singled out because of Trump's frustration of not securing all the trade deals that he has promised, and the peace necessary for the Nobel Peace Prize. On top of that, he might be adopting a famous Chinese saying, "Kill the chicken to scare the monkeys, single out India so that other countries will fall in line." Unfortunately, he underestimated India and the Modi government, another failure to his list of failures.
But, you know, there were certain things that the Indian government did that generally rubbed the United States the wrong way. For instance, you generally buy your military gear from Russia. That's a way to kind of get up, you know, under the skin of America if you're going to buy your armaments from Russia. So I think...
Why is India adamant on being pro-Russia as opposed to the Americans? I will try to keep the story short. To date, India had 5 wars with Pakistan. During the 1971 war, East Pakistan wanted to break away from West Pakistan. West Pakistan sent massive troops to suppress the independence movement, resulting in a genocide of 3 to 4 million Bengalis, whereby a large proportion of them were Hindus, about 400,000, women raped, and 30 million people displaced seeking refuge into India. India responded with a military action when Pakistan committed a preemptive attack on the western border. It was a 12-day war, and India liberated East Pakistan, which is now known as Bangladesh. However, fearing an attack from the alliance of America, China, and Pakistan, India signed a friendship treaty with the Soviet Union. Rightly so, the Nixon-Kissinger administration was staunchly anti-India. Interestingly, this picture looks awfully similar to this one. Anyway, the Americans planned a coalition attack of India in October 1971 using the American 7th Fleet Battle Group involving the aircraft carrier Enterprise from Bay of Tonkin, Vietnam, and formed a coalition with Britain, France, Jordan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Indonesia. China was supposed to join in the attack of India. India was saved by the Soviets as part of the newly signed treaty, sending their nuclear submarines, and threatening all the countries involved of World War III if India was attacked by the coalition. We can pretty much say that it saved the country we still know now as India. Because of the lack of American coalition support, including China, Pakistan surrendered to India with 93,000 soldiers as prisoner of war. To put it in a sad irony, the world's most powerful democracy, America, wanted to destroy the world's largest democracy, India, assisted by the world's largest communist nation, China, only to be saved by the world's most powerful communist nation, Soviet Russia. Because of a turbulent history, Indians remember those who have done wrong and those who helped. The Americans have always betrayed India, while the Russians and Israelis have always had India's back. It took close to 30 to 40 years of hard work on both sides to start rebuilding the American-Indian relationship, only for it to be damaged by a 2-bit property agent residing in the White House. It will take many more years to rebuild the relationship, if it is possible. Indians never forget the Russians and Israelis, but are always rightfully wary of the Americans who did provide some help, but not when it involved conflict with Pakistan. Why I say Americans have a short memory? because they have always thrown India under the bus in favor of Pakistan. The same Pakistan who betrayed the Americans and Europeans in the Afghan war whilst getting money from them, favored the Chinese or Americans depending on who will give more money, responsible for sheltering the groups involved in the 9/11 World Trade Center attack, the same Pakistan that created most of the terrorist organizations operating in Asia and sheltering Osama bin Laden. Also, India has always been very dependent on Russian weapon systems. It may not be as good as the American weapon systems, which was always much more expensive, but the Russians were generous in technology transfer, joint production or production under license. America will sell the same weapons to both India and Pakistan. Also in the past, the Americans have always stopped supporting India on weapons systems or technology when it is in conflict with Pakistan. Also until recently, because of the improved relations with the Americans, India had increased its purchase of American and Israeli weapons while reducing Russian weapons in an attempt to diversify. However, due to Trump, further American weapon sales are somewhat dubious. My final point is the China factor. The American president has taken a short-term view of mending ties with China and does not need India as a counterbalance to China. As such, India is thrown under the bus for the benefit of America and China. India needs to focus more on Russia, Israel, and Europe for political and military alliance.